There are moments in life when someone walks in and everything changes. Not because they stay, not because they explain anything, but because in that one moment something ancient inside you is awakened. You didn't plan for it. You weren't looking. And yet, their presence stirred something in your chest, a strange ache that felt like both recognition and loss. This isn't about love as you've known it. It's not about happily ever after. It's about a connection that defies logic. That feels destined, sacred, impossible. You can't stop thinking about them. But you also know deep down, you can't be with them. Not really. Something stands in the way. Time, distance, life, reality. And so, you're left in the aftershock haunted not by what happened, but by what could never be. It's easy to ask, how do I forget them? How do I move on? But that's not the real question. The real question, the one your soul keeps whispering, is this: why would the universe send me someone I can't have? Why would something so powerful arrive, only to be out of reach? Carl Jung didn't believe in coincidence. He believed the soul moves in symbols, in signs, in mirrors. And sometimes, what looks like heartbreak is actually a message. Not from the mind, from the soul. So if you've ever met someone who lit a fire inside you, someone who felt like home and mystery at the same time, this message is for you. Not to help you let go, but to help you understand why they came. And why, maybe, they were never meant to stay. Carl Jung once said, "There is no such thing as a coincidence." And when it comes to the people who shake our lives to the core, that truth becomes undeniable. You didn't meet them by accident. Their presence, their timing, their effect on you was all part of something deeper, something ancient, something orchestrated not by logic, but by the soul. Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, a moment when the external world aligns perfectly with your internal reality, not just a chance meeting, but a symbolic reflection, a mirror held up to a part of yourself you haven't fully seen, or perhaps a part you've long forgotten. You felt drawn to them, maybe instantly, maybe slowly, but it wasn't because they were your type, or because they said the right things. It was because they stirred something, something that had been buried, something that had been waiting. And that pull, that magnetic sense of familiarity, it wasn't about who they are, it was about who they represent. Because we don't just fall for people, we fall for what they awaken in us. Jung believed that each of us carries an inner world filled with unconscious images, emotions, and memories, what he called archetypes. These are ancient patterns that live within the human psyche. And when someone shows up in our lives and activates one of those patterns, it feels like destiny. But it's not fate. It's reflection. They become the living symbol of a longing inside you, a desire, a wound, a truth. Maybe they embody the freedom you suppressed, the passion you tucked away, the authenticity you traded for safety. And in their presence, that lost part of you starts to stir. That's why it feels so intense. That's why it feels so familiar, even if you just met. Because your soul recognizes something not in them, but through them. This is projection, not in the superficial sense, not an illusion, but the psyche's way of showing you what's ready to be seen. You project the part of yourself you haven't yet claimed. You see in them a version of you that you've been too afraid or too wounded to embrace. They reflect your shadow, or your potential, or both. And this is why these meetings are never random. They arrive at precise moments, right when you think you've figured things out, right when life feels settled or stable. And then, without warning, they crack something open. They're not here to complete you. They're here to confront you with yourself. Because the soul speaks in symbols. It doesn't use words. It uses people, feelings, moments. And sometimes, the most impossible love story is not a story about love at all. It's a story about awakening. So ask yourself, what part of me did this person reflect? What part of me came alive in their presence? Was it passion? Was it pain? Was it a deep remembering? You weren't drawn to them because they were right. You were drawn to them because they activated the part of you that had gone quiet, the part that was waiting. And now that it's awake, the real journey begins. What if I told you that what you felt for them, the longing, the desire, the art was never really about them? What if the intensity wasn't about who they are, but what they mirrored? Carl Jung taught that we don't always fall in love with a person. We fall in love with an image, a reflection, a projection of the parts of ourselves we've disowned, forgotten, or buried so deeply we no longer recognize them. When someone enters your life and consumes your thoughts, when they pull you in with a gravitational force you can't explain, what you're often feeling is not reality. It's activation. You're not just seeing them. You're seeing you through them. Jung called this projection. It's not a flaw. It's not delusion. It's a function of the unconscious. We project onto others the parts of ourselves we're not yet ready to hold, especially the parts we've been taught to fear, suppress, or reject. He went further. He said the person you are obsessed with may be carrying your anima or animus, your inner feminine or inner masculine, archetypal energies that live within all of us. If you've repressed your emotional depth, you might fall headfirst into someone who embodies it. If you've silenced your assertiveness, you may be drawn to someone who lives boldly, loudly, unapologetically. They aren't the source. They're the symbol. They didn't create the fire. They just lit the match. And that's where the confusion begins. Because it feels real. It feels cosmic. And in a way, it is. Just not in the way you think. You're not chasing them. You're chasing reunion with yourself. The parts you were told not to be. The emotions you were never allowed to feel. The desires that were labeled dangerous. All of them come rushing back when this person appears. And it overwhelms you. Because it's not love as you know it. It's recognition. Soul deep. Bone deep. But here's the truth most people never hear. That person is not your missing half. They're your mirror. They show you what you've exiled. They reflect your shadow, your unmet needs, your abandoned voice, your hunger for aliveness, your terror of vulnerability. And so, when they look at you, you don't see just them. You see a vision your unconscious has painted with the raw colors of your inner world. That's why it feels bigger than life. That's why it hurts so much when they're gone. Because you didn't just lose a person. You lost access to the mirror. But the mirror was never theirs to hold. It was always yours. Jung said the shadow holds everything we deny about ourselves. Not just the darkness, but the brilliance too. The parts we envy, the qualities we secretly wish we had. And when someone activates that shadow, it can feel like falling in love or falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, it's both. So the real question isn't, why can't I have them? The real question is, what in me is crying to be reclaimed? Because until you see the image for what it is, an invitation, not a destination, you'll stay trapped in the longing. But when you pause, when you sit with the ache, when you stop trying to possess what was never yours to begin with, something shifts. The spell begins to break. And in that quiet space, you begin to see clearly. They were never the answer. They were the key. You can't be with them. Not because you're not worthy. Not because you did something wrong. Not because love failed. But because you're not yet able to hold the energy that this connection awakened in you. That might be the hardest truth to accept. Because everything inside you screamed that this was real, that this was rare, that this was meant to be. And maybe it was meant to be, but not in the way you imagined. We've been taught to measure love by outcomes. If they stay, it's love. If it works, it's meant to be. If it ends, it wasn't true. But what if that's not how the soul sees it? What if the purpose of this connection was never possession? What if it was transformation? The universe doesn't send us only what we want. It sends us what we're ready to see. And sometimes, it sends a person who holds a frequency so high, so sacred, so raw, that your ego can't hold it yet. Not because you're weak, but because this kind of encounter isn't soft. It doesn't comfort you. It shatters you. It shows you everything that still needs to heal. It brings to the surface all the wounds you thought you'd buried. It reveals your longing, your fear, your hope, your heartbreak all at once. And it asks you to feel it, not fix it, not control it, just feel it. Because this isn't about having someone. It's about becoming someone. Someone who can hold that same depth, not in another, but in yourself. So no, you didn't lose them. You were woken up by them. Their role wasn't to stay. Their role was to stir your soul, to peel back the layers, to light a fire inside you that refuses to go out. And now the question becomes, what will you do with that fire? Will you try to put it out? Will you chase someone else to fill the void? Or will you let it burn away everything that no longer serves who you're becoming? Jung believed that the soul doesn't speak through logic or reason. It speaks through symbols, through disruption, through pain that refuses to be ignored. That person, the one who left, or who could never stay, they were a symbol. They didn't come to complete your story. They came to interrupt it, to tear a hole in the script you've been living so the truth could finally rise. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels cruel. But sometimes, the universe takes someone out of reach, not to punish you, but to protect the sanctity of what's being born inside you. You don't have to understand it all now. But if you can stay with the AKF, you can sit in the space they once filled without running, you'll begin to hear something. A quiete voice, a deeper knowing. And it will tell you this. They weren't yours to keep. They were yours to awaken. Real love isn't about having someone. It's about seeing yourself. The deepest kind of love doesn't bind. It reveals. It opens. It awakens. And sometimes it arrives in the most painful form of all, the one you can't have. But what if that impossible love wasn't a mistake? What if it was a sacred initiation? Carl Jung taught that the psyche speaks through symbols, and nothing pierces the surface of the soul more powerfully than love that cannot be fulfilled. When you meet someone who ignites your spirit but remains just out of reach, something happens, not on the surface but far below it. A doorway opens, one you didn't even know existed, and it doesn't lead to them. It leads inward. You begin to see things in yourself you never noticed before, longings you had buried, strengths you forgot, emotions you were never allowed to feel, and suddenly, you're not the same. Not because they loved you, but because they mirrored the parts of you you're finally ready to reclaim. We're so used to measuring love by proximity, by promises, by permanence. But what if love's greatest power isn't in staying but in showing? What if the real gift was not their presence, but what their presence awakened? Jung said, what you resist persists, what you accept transforms. And in the face of impossible love, we are given a choice. We can resist, cling, chase, demand answers, or we can surrender, not to defeat, not to loss, but to transformation, to the idea that maybe this wasn't meant to satisfy your longing, but to expose it. Maybe they didn't come to complete you, but to strip away the illusions of what you thought love had to look like. Because the soul doesn't seek comfort. It seeks wholeness, and wholeness often begins in heartbreak. When you stop asking, how do I get them back? And start asking, what did they reveal in me? The real work begins. That's the turning point. The shift from obsession to awakening, from pain to purpose, from longing to light. Impossible love is not here to punish you. It's here to refine you. It cracks your heart open so that something deeper can be born, and that something is not about them. It's about you, about how you begin to see yourself through new eyes, how you start honoring what you used to silence, how you begin treating your emotions not as burdens but as teachers. This is not the love story you expected. It's more. It's the story of your becoming. So let this pain do what it came to do. Let it guide you. Let it open you. Let it remind you of the vast, wild, untamed beauty that lives inside you and always has. Because the point was never to hold them. It was to hold yourself, and that is love that liberates. Healing doesn't begin when you forget them. It begins when you stop trying to, when you stop running from the ache, when you stop bargaining with the pain, when you stop reaching outward for someone to save you from the silence inside. That's when the journey begins. Not toward them, but toward yourself. You stop waiting for someone to choose you. You stop begging the past to rewrite itself. You stop chasing closure from someone who was never meant to carry it. Instead, you choose yourself. And in that moment, everything shifts. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the integration of all your parts, the light and the shadow, the known and the hidden. It's not about perfection. It's about wholeness. You begin to see that your longing for them was never just about them. It was your soul's cry to return home. Home to the parts of you that you abandoned long ago, the parts you thought were unworthy, the parts you gave away in exchange for love. And now, those pieces are rising. The heartbreak becomes a portal. The sorrow becomes sacred ground, because now, you're no longer asking, why did they leave? You're asking, what part of me did I leave behind in their absence? This is the moment of awakening, not the mystical kind that floats above pain, but the grounded kind, the kind that sits in it, breathes through it, lets it carve you open until there's nothing left to lose but your illusions. The version of you that once begged to be chosen, that version begins to dissolve, and in its place, something new emerges. A self that doesn't need validation to feel worthy. A self that doesn't measure value by someone else's presence. A self that no longer sees love as something to chase, but something to become. You realize they didn't come into your life to love you. They came to awaken you, to show you what you've been blind to reflect the depth, the beauty, the intensity that already lives inside you. And once you see that, truly see it, you stop needing them to return, because you've returned to yourself. And this self is not incomplete. This self is not broken. It's whole, not because everything makes sense now, but because you no longer need it to. The story didn't end the way you hoped, but it began something better. It began you. You stop looking back with regret. You start looking inward with reverence. This is the gift of the impossible. It strips you down to the truth. And when all the fantasies fade, when all the projections fall away, what you're left with is real. You, fully present, fully alive, fully enough. This is not the ending. This is your return. If it still hurts, if there's a tightness in your chest, a question that won't let go, a tenderness you can't name, don't rush to make it disappear. That feeling is not a sign of weakness. It's the voice of your soul, finally speaking. The ache means something moved inside you, something real, something ancient, something that had been waiting for a moment like this to be seen. Don't silence it. Don't numb it. Listen, because pain like this doesn't come to destroy. It comes to open, to reveal, to call you back to a part of yourself that's been waiting in the quiet. And maybe you don't have the full clarity yet. Maybe you still feel lost in the space between understanding and surrender. That's okay. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're becoming. So if you've made it this far, these words stirred something deep, then stay. Not for the answers, but for the unfolding, because the journey isn't over. Not even close. In fact, it's only just begun. If this video touched something deep within you, don't let it fade into the noise of your day. Share it not because of an algorithm, but because someone out there might be holding the same questions, feeling the same ache, and waiting for a message like this. And if you're looking for a space to keep exploring, to keep remembering who you really are, then subscribe, turn on the bell, not out of habit, but because something in you already knows it's time. Your soul is knocking. Let's keep walking this path together.